and then like have Robert Stack say, breakfast pastries.
I think it needs to be a little bit more specific. Like,
Yeah, what kind of pastry?
But what I love is that it's not.
Raspberry croissant.
Like, they didn't care enough to figure out, was it a crawler? We don't care.
in real life.
And there could be a clue there.
Yeah.
I got you live already, okay?
Okay, great. So we can, well, I guess we can just start anytime we want then, can't we?
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and do it. So welcome, folks.
Sounds good.
My name is Jim Jewell. We use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm English faculty here at North Seattle College. Before we begin, I do want to take a moment for a land and labor acknowledgement. Land acknowledgement has deep roots in indigenous culture, and we at NSC think it deserves more than just prepared statements. So I ask at this time that you just consider the indigenous cultures on whose land we stand and remain to this day a vital part of our community. And we further ask that you consider active allyship. And consider supporting organizations like Red Eagle Soaring Native Youth Theater. It's one of my favorite organizations in town. We also ask that you take the time to consider the unpaid and underpaid labor upon which our society has been built. And one way to do that is through support for labor unions, such as AFT and WFC in the Seattle Colleges District, as they advocate for worker rights and protections. But now on to the main event. Derek McFadden is a Seattle-based editor and the award-winning author of the novels What Death Taught Terrance and The Santa Claus Agreement. I met Derek this summer as a playwright participating in the 1448 Theater Festival, and as we'll learn today, he is also a poet. And it just so happens that Derek was born with a mild case of cerebral palsy, but I think you can learn the most about him through this one line in his bio, so one that I keep repeating. Palsy definitely helped shape who I am today, but does not define me, and it never has. Like if I was going to give one line to introduce you, it would have just been that one. So please welcome me in welcoming Derek McFadden to North Seattle College.
Thanks, Jim.
And Derek, is there anything that we should add to that bio? Anything else you want to tell us before we get into it?
I also host the podcast Writing While Handicapped on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. So if you look for Authors on the Air Global Radio Network on any of the places you look for your podcasts, you can find me there.
All right, fantastic. And you're going to start us out today by sharing a little of your work, a few poems, yes?
Yeah, I can do that. That's my plan. Let's see. So the first one I'm actually going to share is I self-published this book after 12 years of writing it.
Wow.
And another 7 years of trying to get an agent and getting really close a couple of times. And and just not quite getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one of the poems I wrote. I put it as what do you call I wanted to say epitaph, but that's not right. Epigraph of the epigraph of my book. It's called The Sting. Critics deliver thoughtless blows, their impact solid and lasting, with not much more than a condemnation of the prose, a paragraph's long linguistic blasting. As a writer, thoughtful and careful in construction, sure to have my musings torn apart, every punctuation mark, every word choice, every conscious decision as to voice, each contraction or conjunction, demolition without compunction. I ask only this of the critic intent on the sting. Before you end another promising career as it begins, might you read the damn thing?
Yeah, as a fellow writer, when I read your book this past summer, and that epigraph definitely hit me. And it made me think of my students too, and it kind of reminded me to put them in that place where they probably see me as the critic.
Yeah, and here's the thing, critics aren't bad.
Mm-hmm.
Critics are, but the thing we have to remember as writers is critics are not for writers.
Right.
Critics are for readers. Critics tell certain readers, this book is for you, or it is not.
Right.
And then it's up to the reader who they believe. Nobody ever looked at a Siskel and Ebert show and thought, well, they both loved it, so I'm definitely going to go. Like, sometimes you did, but sometimes you were like, that looks like crap.
Right.
I don't care if they like it, I'm not going.
So in that way, do you think that the critic's job should be as more kind of explaining the work as opposed to giving it just the pure, this is good or not?
Yeah, well, so one of my reviews that I got, and I'll never forget this, the reviewer said they didn't like my book, which, whatever, you can say that, right? But then their reasoning was, but I just don't like books about the afterlife. Well then, why are you reading my book?
Right.
You are fully within your right not to like it, that's totally fine. But then don't, you're just the wrong person for this book.
Right. It'd be a little bit like me saying, that's a terrible movie, well, but I don't like horror movies.
Right. The Exorcist is a good movie if you like horror movies. I'm not a horror movie person, so
Right.
I would not be the person to, I'm not going to say don't go see it. So
So you have another poem from the
I
book
do.
for us?
I'm getting to it here.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a longer one. So this is called Many Times Mistaken, and it made my girlfriend cry the first time she read this book. So, if anyone believes erroneously that God, who is to have brought forth heaven and earth, while his angels sang in untouchable harmony, birthed them by mistake, may I, with an implement I hope will never shy from my truth, humbly advise. Let a prayer be sent from this poet's pen for all who wish it meant for them. Anyone who requires proof, up into the universe's roofless expanse, that those who have yet to discover their gifts, given out of love, not by chance, shall have the option to call for help from up above when their lives seem rent or devoid of direction, knowing that call will be met with, do not fear life. There is no such thing as perfection. I am with you. You might feel alone, at times even crazy, but you are safe under my protection, and nothing can be accomplished without faith. Like your parents before you, and theirs before them, you come from a God who is many times mistaken, yet you are so far from a mistake.
Yeah, I can see why your girlfriend might have been moved to tears by that one. I remember reading that as well, and it hit me on two levels. One, just the idea of anyone imagining themselves to be a mistake, and then because I'm a father, that middle part of the idea that perfection does not exist, and that reminder that no, you are enough, and you're kind of perfect as you are, and that's a message I've always wanted my daughter to hear as well. That's beautiful.
I think when I was a kid, I heard that from my father, but the only place I really heard it constantly was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, of all places.
Absolutely.
Right, and but it made me feel like it doesn't matter what the people think, who don't like me or who don't understand me and my palsy and what makes me me, because this person gets it. Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing is, I think that was the whole point of that show, and so I've always appreciated him for that.
Yeah, absolutely. The neighborhood was a place that we could all belong and all be fully respected.
Yeah, and everybody had a place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you said you had one more poem that actually you have just memorized.
Yeah. Well, hey, give me a second.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay. It's called Who You'll Be. Mm. Who you are now is not who you will be. Who you were then is worth remembering. Who you'll be at last is someone you won't know until you take the leaps of life and learn and love and grow.
Oh, okay, that one got me. That's beautiful. And I was not kidding when I said at the start that apparently you're a poet. I didn't, after reading the novel, I didn't think, I thought of the poems as part of the novel, as opposed to you being also a poet.
I actually had an editor who was editing an early version of this, mm-hmm. who said, "Did you write the poems? Because you can't put someone else's poems in your book." And I was like, "Yeah, I wrote them. Well, good, because okay, then you can keep them." Well, thank you.
We definitely have something in common then, because I once performed at the OK Hotel in downtown Seattle at a poetry slam, and had someone ask me afterwards, so I have to ask, do you just make it up as you go along? And I said, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. No, I wrote these ahead of time.
It depends. Did you like it?
I know, that's right.
If you didn't like it, then yeah, I made it up as I went along, and you should just leave. If you liked it, then yeah, I wrote it.
So I have a bunch of questions I threw to you ahead of time, but we're just going to kind of jump here and there through them.
No worries.
But first I want you to just tell me, like, I kind of know what the path was to this novel being published, but what was your path to becoming a writer or allowing yourself to call yourself a writer?
Oh man, allowing myself to call myself a writer, that's a whole
I guess
other,
that's
other
true.
phrase.
That wasn't even on the sheet I sent you.
No, but that's a whole other phrase. So when you have palsy, you get told you have palsy very early. And you have this, and there it goes. But my dad was always, said, but you can do anything you want to do. And I think it came from growing up in the 60s, and they did anything they wanted to do. So that's what they wanted to pass along. And my mom was a reader. My dad was a writer, my mom was a reader, and I think I got the best of both worlds a little bit. The first book I read where I was like, I could do that, was Bunnicula. Did you ever read the Bunnicula books?
Yeah.
And I just thought, somebody sits in a room and actually writes that. It doesn't just appear on the page. And I thought, can I do that? And what you do as a writer when you're that young too, is you copy a lot of.
Oh yes.
Right. It's not plagiarism because you're not trying to get it published or anything, but you just want to say, can I mimic the thing I know? And then at a certain point, that mimicry becomes your style. But when did I know I wanted to be a writer? When I was 6 years old.
Wow.
You read my book, so you've heard about it. But there was a dream that I had where I was told, you will be a writer and this is what you will do. And I woke up and I think I told my dad, like, I'm going to be a writer. That's what I'm going to do. And my dad, who fancied himself a writer, was like, okay, well, I can help you with that. At least, in the support, in being supportive and being there if you need anything. And then, so that's when I knew I wanted to be a writer. When did I know I could call myself a writer? It depends on the day.
Right.
There are some days when I love writing, because some days you get in the flow of it and you love it. There are some days when you love having produced something.
Right.
And you say, I wrote that. You know how I know? I don't have to write it anymore.
Right. I'm done with that one.
But so I think that's a difference. That in the question you asked, there's really different answers to that.
Yeah, I will tell my students that you're a writer when you're writing, because it's that reminder then to just keep pushing through, especially those days when it's not as rewarding. It feels better to get to the end than did any step along the way.
Well, and what Jay Buhner from the Seattle Mariners said very simply. He said, you can only hit a home run if you step up to the plate.
Right.
Okay? So if you don't try, you're not going to be a writer. If you don't try, you're not going to be whatever you want to be, a lawyer or anything. So you have to make the effort to try. And I think what's hard is that in this day and age, there's writing, and then there's the business of writing.
Right.
And they're two different things. And they're very much separated, but also very much together, because you need one for the other to work.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because you work in the business of writing not just as a writer, but also as an editor. In particular, I'm really curious to hear about your work as an editor, but especially working as an editor for fiction. Because I think that folks out in the world can imagine editing for like a newspaper, just adding grammar, but how do you see your job as an editor for fiction?
It depends on what the author wants and in which capacity I'm doing the editing. If I'm editing with an agent, like I used to work with an agent for about 7.5 years, where I was her second reader, and I would deal with authors and everything else. If I'm editing those people, I know that they are looking for publication. So I'm editing with the intent of get it under 100,000 words, preferably under 80. and please make it make sense. Because the thing is, and I don't begrudge a writer their ability to go down a rabbit hole and just, oh, I like this, I'm gonna write it. That's fine, but if you know what your plot is and your rabbit hole stops your plot, and absolutely, you know, it's a big semi in the middle of your plot moving forward, you got to get it out. That's the main thing. And then if I'm editing, like fiction is that way. If I'm editing nonfiction, and I've done a couple of those, the one nonfiction that I really remember, he wasn't trying to get it published. He was editing for his family. He wanted a story for his family, and I kind of worked this through an intermediary who knew the guy, right? And so I edited the prologue and said, "Is this what he wants?" And I got a call back. He wants it exactly in his voice, even though it's grammatically incorrect, even though it does, because his family will know it's him talking.
Right.
So, and the guy literally said, do less. Do as little as you would do while still doing what you would do. And I did. That's how I worked that.
And it's interesting then, so when you're working in fiction, you have two levels of focus, like that you're looking at the language and the clarity on the linguistic rhetorical level, but also the way that plot functions as well. Yeah,
and that's why oftentimes I will, like I'm currently working one where I am working the second pass, because I got through the language and some of that stuff the first pass, but now I know the plot and what to excise and what needs to be removed in order to make it a correct length and also keep it moving.
Right. And how did you develop that eye for like the function of plot in particular? Is it like a combination of like where you learned it from or taught it to yourself?
Oh, it's a combination of having worked with that agent who would say to me, "That doesn't work. That kills. That doesn't work at all." And then it's a combination of like throwing books across the room, because there were certain books, and you know, books that were very highly lauded, where I'm like, at a certain point, I got like 100 pages in, and I'm like, I don't need to read this. Nobody is standing over me going, finish this, finish it. No. And I don't know what the passage was, but it was so annoying, and I was like, that is so overwrought and so overdone. And the other thing is, you can tell the author's proud of themselves.
Those are the worst moments,
and
I agree.
it's like, you're proud of that? No. And I threw it across the room and picked it up and put it, I think I gave it to somebody else and said, don't read this, just get rid of it. In some neighborhood library or something, you know, one of those.
Right, the little free libraries.
Yeah, I just said, get rid of it, I don't want to see it.
The first time I ever did the same of throwing a book, it was actually Tom Robbins, because it was a line about someone who had once spilled some hair dye and ruined their favorite sneakers. And so from then on, he died with his boots on. And he was so clearly proud of himself, I said, I'm done with this book. I can't anymore.
Well, Tom Robbins specifically, and I mean, I don't want to crap on an author, but Tom Robbins specifically.
He doesn't care what we think, it's fine.
No, he won't see this. But he likes to go down those rabbit holes and just luxuriate in, they'll give me pages. They'll let me write pages. Great, but what are you saying? You know, oftentimes too, if I'm watching a movie, I can get the end of a movie and go, cool, what was the message?
Right.
What was the message? And you said that, you know, we met on 1448, and I think for an author, for a writer, it's so hard because we, as novelists and poets, we sit in rooms by ourselves, and we don't know if or when anyone is going to take a look at what we write.
Right.
The nice thing about 1448, when you get called to do it, whatever you put up, they're going to put it up.
Right. You're going to see it performed 24 hours later.
It's going to happen. So you know, But the nice part about that is it's going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And when I published the Santa Claus Agreement, I had a small imprint publisher, so I knew it had a place to go. It had some place to fit, and I think writing for the speculation of publishing, which I did for Terrance, is so different from writing for actual publication when you know it's there.
Right.
When you're trying to hit a deadline. Those are two different kinds of writing, and now I know I can do both of them.
Yeah, and I've always loved the deadline-driven stuff because it gives me a little bit extra motivation.
Well, yeah, I mean, and also, you better put something out because we have all the stuff is up. If you don't turn anything in, you get fined by whoever monitors that. There are fines and stuff. I know that, like, when I put Terrance up on Ingram Spark or whatever it was that I used, they were like, if you change the date of publication, we will fine you.
Oh, wow.
Because they like making money.
There's that.
And that's a way they can do it. And so you can't begrudge them that, I guess.
So did what Death Taught Terrance help set up then the agreement with the imprint, the smaller imprint for the Santa Claus agreement?
In a way. So it's very circuitous, but basically so the way that it works, the way that my career, if you want to call it that, works, is that my dad and I were both looking for agents at the same time, querying. He had a novel and I had Terrance. And he got an agent, and that agent said to him, I really need a second reader. And my dad was like, what about Derek? So she sent me an email and said, would you do this? And I said, sure. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the first books that came across my desk was a book by a man named Dr. Bradley Harper. It was a novel based on Arthur Conan Doyle chasing Jack the Ripper.
Okay.
So there was a gap between the first Holmes story and the second. Mm-hmm. And that gap also coincides with the time that Jack the Ripper was terrorizing London. And so he said, well, what if in that gap, Scotland Yard called and wanted help with Jack the Ripper? That was one of the first things that crossed my desk, and it was one of those situations where the agent said to me, I met this guy at a conference. I don't know if it's good. The hook is good, but I don't know if it's good. You let me know. And I said, yeah, we should be in on this. We should be in on this. And in the end, he got a 2-book deal, and he actually was a finalist for the Edgar Award.
Wow. For
his first novel, for that Knife in the Fog. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's impressive.
And then through that, one of his editors for that book was the man who ended up being the person who ran the imprint that then published my Santa Claus book.
So I feel like I should have brought you here just like, this is how to network.
Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, you asked me one question and it took, that's how long, but the thing is, you don't know. You don't know who's going to be a good, you can say like, oh, maybe this person will work, maybe, but you just have to, this is the thing, you just have to do what you can do and do it the best you can do it. And if you do it the best you can do it, people are going to notice.
Yeah.
And people are going to want you in their orbit, in their network.
Yeah, I think people can read the integrity in that way, like something that really comes from somebody's full heart and full dedication to it. It comes out in the work. It always has to.
The other thing is, the opposite of that also comes out in the work.
That's true. Absolutely.
You can tell when someone is like phoning it in.
I'm a community college English teacher. I definitely know this. So I realize that the answer to this question might be different based on what you said earlier when you are working with a deadline versus not.
Yeah.
But, like, where do the ideas for your writing projects develop, and talk a little bit about what your process is like?
Oh man, my process. No one wants my process. Well, so when I was a kid and I was reading books, everybody would say like, oh, I love to read this book because that character is like me.
Mm-hmm.
I love how that character is like me. I could not say that. There were no characters who I'd be like, that character is like me. My brother, for example, loves superheroes and loves the idea of like radioactive spiders biting you, which I don't know why you would love that. But anyway, he loves it. I don't see the same joy in that because when I think of superheroes, I think of somebody who I am not sometimes.
Right.
And when I'm writing, that's my superpower.
Hmm.
Or so I used to think that was my only superpower. But the thing is that I have been taught, no, your superpower is that you help people.
Hmm.
You write, and your writing helps people, and your being around them helps people, and stuff like that. So that I think that my ideas for my writing projects come from, I want to write something that if I was that kid, I would feel comfortable reading it and saying, that's like me. Mm-hmm. That's who I am. And you know, so my two novels have main characters who have palsy. Terrance is a bit more specifically a self-insert. They both are, but Terrance is a bit more specific because I am also legally blind because God has a sense of humor, and it's like, not only do you deserve palsy, but also the legal blindness sounds great.
Just in case that wasn't enough.
I'm gonna go off and create the manatee now. So he gave me both of those things, and it's hard. People always ask, what can you see based, and they say it like this, what can you see compared to what I can see? And my answer is always, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I know that my visual field to this side is cut off. I know that the way I would describe it is, most of you have eyes in the back of your head compared to me. I don't, and then detail is cut off, which in this day and age, you don't need to see every detail, Some details you can leave out. But yeah, that's the answer to that.
Mm-hmm. And so this is something that I put in the questions, like, because I haven't read Santa Claus Agreement yet. I'll get to it, I think around next holiday season. But
That's the right time for it.
Yeah, I figured. And I read What Death Taught Terrance last summer, and so it was not so much like that there was an unexplored niche, but just that there was an audience that needed to be served by what you were writing.
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, and so when you beyond like the self-insert, how do you use your own experiences then as like fodder for this writing?
Oh well, that's why as a writer, you learn to become an eavesdropper. Mm-hmm. You learn how people talk. The worst writing is when somebody doesn't know how to write dialogue, and you can tell real quick because everything is, oh, that's that person I met right before they had that heart attack on July 4th of last year. Like, okay, that you're telling me everything you should be showing me, and you can do that in a flashback.
It's that one meme line from
yeah.
Madam Web last year.
Oh,
it was that kind of line.
Madam Web. Speaking of bad movies, but anyway, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is that I've been told by people who don't write, which is hilarious, that everybody can write. Yeah, I guess you can all write grocery lists. Everybody can write grocery lists. Writing in the way that we are writing is very different. Now, and here's the thing: there are some people who they want to write literary fiction. That's what they want to write. I would say I'm a little bit of a upmarket, so I'm a little bit literary, a little bit commercial. Mm-hmm. I don't think I fit necessarily either one, but I'm also not one of those people who's like, oh, I want to write thrillers, because when I've heard authors talk about why they write a thriller, they'll say, oh, I write that thriller because I imagine the idea frightens me. Well, the idea that frightens me most is being attacked. And I haven't figured out how I would get out of that yet. So I don't want to write it because it would put me in a real anxiety-inducing situation. I write stories that hopefully uplift, and they might start out sad. People can say, "Oh, that book is sad."
Well, you made your girlfriend cry.
A lot of writers write to make girls cry.
Shh! Don't tell everyone that. You're giving away our secrets.
You know, it's what we do. And also, women are a huge part of the reading audience, and you have to know that. You have to know who you're writing for. If you're writing a book and you're like, I'm writing this for me and I don't know who it's for, well, that's perfectly fine, but then don't try to publish it.
Yeah, that's journal writing.
Yeah, that's so. And some people have said that my book is like reading someone's raw diary. That's true, but I guess it could feel that way. But I have also edited it, I hope well, enough that there is a cohesive plot. If there's not a cohesive plot, you might be able to make an independent movie, but writing a book and trying to publish it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, and so this is a question specifically about what death taught Terrance, and it'll be a challenge to answer without spoiling your book.
Okay.
We don't want to do that.
Right.
But one of the things I said when you arrived today, and I've said to many people when I've suggested this book, is I feel like you really stuck the landing, and the endings of books are incredibly hard to do well. So how do you think about crafting a satisfying ending? Like, what were you looking for?
So there's an arc in what Death Taught Terrance says. There should be an arc in every book. I needed to know, and I think some authors, maybe most, should know if they want to get the ending right, what the ending is before they write the book. I've heard some authors say, I write the ending first and work back. My process, and this is why I say you don't want to do my process, like, I've gotten better at it. I now know, because I'm good at editing, I now know, okay, I'm going to start and just go all the way through. But with Terrance, I wrote the scenes as they came to me, which then made it really hard to edit them in, because it's like, okay, this is a good scene, where does it fit? And that comes down to killing your darlings. There is a form of, like, so many times you write the best scene ever, but the book you're writing, it just doesn't fit in it.
Right.
You know? So I think the ending of Terrance, that once I came to it, once I understood what it was, and it was not at the beginning like it should have been. It was not at the beginning of the writing process. Once I understood it, it was like unlocking a treasure chest, because I was like, now I can get to the end of draft 1 and actually go back through and edit. Until then, I didn't even feel like it was worth looking at editing, because I didn't know where the arc was leading.
Right.
And if you don't know where the arc is leading, why are you trying to edit? You know?
And is that something then that you ask the clients that you work with as an editor right away? It's kind of, what are your intentions that I'm trying to fit?
I do. And also, what are your intentions, and how deep do you want me to go? Because I can either go into the actual Word document and fully, edit, or I can stay on the margins and just say, I suggest this. And some authors will want one, and some authors will want the other. I am not about changing anyone's work, but I'm also about making work better. So if I know, well, this just doesn't work, I'm hoping, and most of my clients are this way, that they will say, okay, if it doesn't work, Derek says it doesn't work, get it out. Right. There are others, and we've all met this writer, okay? I have written the best book ever in the history of book writing. That's correct for you. The book you just wrote was the best book you could write at the time. It's not the best book ever. Somebody said this to me, and it's funny. Think about two authors, Hemingway and Charles Dickens. Hemingway had to pay per word because he was telegramming back war correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
He had to pay per word. So his style is going to be clipped and short, and I don't want to get shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Dickens was paid per word. So his story, I'm going to write the longest thing I can so you can pay me the most, because I have 6 kids and a wife. And some mistresses, probably. So I've always thought it would be really interesting to see the two of them talk about writing. I've always said that Hemingway would beat Dickens up, but
Of course, yeah.
I do think them talking writing would be interesting because it's two different schools.
Mm-hmm.
I like Hemingway for the dialogue. One of the things he said was, as much as possible, I get out of the way and let the characters tell the story.
Right.
So when you read Hemingway, you're not going to read a lot of narrative prose. You're going to read a lot of dialogue that, if he's in Spain, if we're talking The Sun Also Rises, he's even grammatically writing it in Spanish, translated to English. He's very specific about that.
So I want to move from the editing work again to your writing work. And we've talked about your process, but I'm also curious about your practice. And for me, that the difference really being like the process is more sort of our mental thing, our approach.
Right.
But the practice is, what do we do every day to keep ourselves writing? And so what is your writing practice?
It depends on if I have an editing job.
Right.
Because my eyes are such that I have to get real close to the computer to see it. And so if I have an editing job, I focus on that because But to me, that's also writing. I'm seeing someone else's writing. I'm seeing the style.
It's adding to your rhetorical awareness.
And it's adding to my, you can do that. There have been times where even I go, can you do that? Okay, you can do that. When I am writing now, for example, with the Santa Claus Agreement, I had the plot down. I knew exactly what the plot was. But it was also one of those situations where I felt like if I drop the ball and stop writing for one day, it's gonna leave. The muse is just gonna, and I don't know if that's accurate.
You were kind of trying to keep that thread taut.
So it was a matter of I'm racing some unseen force to get it done, and still have it be, cohesive and what I wanted to say. So those are two different things. I think if I were writing, right now I've just finished a, not even a draft. I think we're past the draft stage. And that was an interesting writing process because it's a novel in 6 stories.
Oh, interesting.
It's a novel that holds together in 6 stories, but 2 of them were previously written, kind of, and then I tied back and was able to make it work for the story. And so that felt like editing myself while I was writing. And the thing is, I wouldn't normally recommend that because they're 2 different mindsets.
It's something I tell my students to try to keep those functions separate.
You have to. So if I was on an editing day where I'm like, okay, I got this part done, but I'm not going to write because I'm not in that mindset. Tomorrow I will get up and write this part that needs to be written. So yeah, 2 different mindsets. You try not to cross them if at all possible.
Well, and you've mentioned because of your site, you'll get really close to a screen.
Yeah.
In your work, do you make use of any assistive technology at all?
I don't know if it's quite assistive technology. It kind of is. For editing, when I edit, I ask for the book in Word. But Word does not read back to you because Word does not have that. You can dictate to it, but you can't have it read back to you. I don't know why. But what I do is I take the Word document and put it Apple's version of Word, which is Pages.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the background, Pages reads to me while I look at the Word document. So
interesting.
and I can hear the mistakes. So they're missing a comma there. Oh, okay, that's missing this. It makes it so much easier to edit. Yeah. And then if for example, I host a podcast, and so when I listen to a lot of books on audio, and I listen to them very fast, because I can take it in, and that way, a 12-hour book becomes, I can do this in 4. And it's funny. Some people say, "Well, that hurts my brain." I can understand that, but it works for me, and especially if I have to craft questions based on what I've just heard. I want to do the podcast as quickly as possible after I've listened to the piece.
And how many episodes have you done of the podcast so far?
Oh gosh, 27, 28.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So how long are you doing it on a weekly, or is it kind of as you find guests available?
So there are times the way that it works is I get sent catalogs by our producer, and I'll say, I'm interested in that book, and if the publicist is interested in sending it to me, then they do. And then it becomes, are you interested in it, am I interested in doing the interview? Most times I say yes. There are times when I'm like, you know what, that's just not right for me. Not that it's a bad book, just not right for me today to be doing that. But I appreciate every writer, because I know how hard it is to put a book out and to set up a book tour, however you do it, whether you're going to bookstores or talking to somebody on Zoom. It's hard. You take time out of your day. And the thing is, authors don't. Authors are authors. Their job is to sit in a room and think of things. So they're not in most cases going to be natural. Let me go in front of a bunch of people and talk. I don't mind doing that, because I love radio and I love talking to people like you. But a lot of authors don't.
Right.
It's hard.
Yeah, I think I've known writers who have gravitated to the practice because it is something they can do in a solitary way. Like the solitariness works for them.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you started writing because you wanted there to be stories that you could see yourself in, or that other people could see themselves in. But have you now faced any instances where people try to pigeonhole you as a writer with cerebral palsy, a writer with a disability?
Yeah. The funny thing about that is that's why my podcast is called Writing While Handicapped, and not Handicapped Writer. Because and people say, well, is it handicapped or disabled? For me, it's either or. You can, your mileage may vary on that. But I've had people say, how does it feel to be a marginalized writer? Do you understand that by asking me that question, you're making me a marginalized writer?
Right.
I don't think of myself that way. The part that's hard for people to get, I think, is this may look abnormal to you. It's my normal. It's what I've always known. It's what I will always know. So it's to say, I'm marginalized, huh? That's hard.
Right. I still remember a instructor or professor I had at Syracuse University. He was the head of the African American Studies department, and as part of a panel discussion, he pointed out this word minority. Listen to it. Do you want to be it?
Exactly. And then there are so many. Now there are so many marginalized groups who are kind of getting their moment in the sun to, this book is about this marginalized group, and this book is about this marginalized group. And what I find is that still the disabled or the handicapped don't have that. It's
Right.
really hard to find that. The closest we had before she passed away was Judy Heumann, who was one of the people, if you ever saw the movie Crip Camp.
Oh yeah, I did.
She was the kind of leader of the camp who had polio. She passed away recently, but she was one of the main people who I looked at and went, okay, I see what she did back in the 70s, and I look at that now, and I go, well, when I was in the 80s, 70s and 80s, when she was doing that, I was in school and I was on a 504, and because of what she did, I got put on an IEP, which is better for us. It allows better teaching, more one-on-one teaching, and that is because of what those people did. It's because of the activism.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I have to be thankful for that, because one of the plays I started to write a play, I haven't finished it. Started to write a play about a handicapped person who, I got sucked down a rabbit hole it was a YouTube rabbit hole of the game show What's My Line?
Oh, yeah.
From the 1950s. And you would watch that, and every now and then they'd say, we sent a good donation to the cerebral palsy home of such and such a place. And it's like, oh wait, so people like me were not allowed to be with their families. They were sent away.
Oh, right.
They were sent away into places, institutions. Like, they were basically told, go over here until you die. I'm very grateful to be where I am today, and I know the people that fought for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, in a couple of different instances, as you've talked about your work, you do a really good job of advocating for yourself. Even we talking before the event today, saying like you have that ability if someone calls and says, I need advice, to be able to say, I just don't have the bandwidth today.
Yeah.
Do you think that ability to advocate for yourself comes from the experience of having to navigate a world that had previously sent anyone with cerebral palsy away,
Yeah.
and to navigate that in a way that allowed you to have power and agency?
I think it does, but I also think part of what that comes from is being having advocates on my side
Mm-hmm.
who say you are allowed to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a long time as a kid, I was told, this is how you do things, this is how they are done, and you're doing them this way. Okay, I mean, when you're told how things are going to go, you're not going to question that. That's just
Right.
how you're raised.
Mm-hmm.
Once you break free of that, and for somebody who has palsy, I mean, it took me, I'm not ashamed to say it took me 40 years to leave my dad's house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it wasn't because I didn't try before. I was scared. I'm legally blind and I'm palsied. I need somebody who I know is going to be there on the other side to catch me if I fall.
Right.
But once I realized I had that, I also have always been the kind of person who wants to help people. But once I realized I had the advocacy, then I realized you can advocate for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of how I realized that was the writing, because every book I write is therapy for me as I'm writing the first draft of it.
Mm-hmm.
The first draft is therapy, and the second draft is how can this be for other people? Because I know what it did for me. Now, how do I position it for other people to read it and get something out of it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that, especially that turn of I'm going to write a first draft for me,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to edit all the other drafts for my audience.
You have to. I think you have to do that. And then the other thing is, once your book is out, it's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
You have, and that's what's so hard is you have to be able to say I can break away from it. And for me, especially if you have self-inserts, you have to be able to say if a critic says I didn't like that, they're not saying they didn't like you.
Right.
They're saying they didn't like that. That's fine. That's like somebody saying I didn't like rice-a-roni, Okay.
I always feared too much autobiography in my work because of my family. I was worried that critiques of my family would get out there, and that they would be the ones that would point it out.
Well, so I've and I in my short stories I've written characters who aren't me. I can do it's doable, but if I'm going to write a novel length thing, the reason why I tend to self-inserts is I know the experience, you don't.
Right.
Short stories, when I'm trying to write a character that you will connect with, I'm trying to write a character that you know, that I can also say, I've seen that character.
Mm-hmm.
I can empathize. A lot of writing is empathy. If you don't have empathy, you're going to be a really bad writer.
See, you just jumped ahead to my last question about advice already. That's great. I'm hoping that a few of my creative writing students are watching, but if not, they're going to hear that repeated to them. I love that need for empathy.
You have to.
Yeah. I think you kind of alluded to what the answer to this next question might be. This will be well, after this question, we'll see if there's any questions from the folks here, or if we got any from folks in the live stream. But what does literary success look like to you?
Okay, so I saw this question when you sent it, and there's a difference between what it looked like 20 years ago and what it looks like now. I was told as a kid, when it was determined that I was going to be a writer, and he's good at this, okay, that I was going to be a New York Times best-selling author, and my dad and I were going to, be a father-son duo, and we were going to take over and then I found out how the business works. And that not to say anything against the New York Times, but that the New York Times bestseller list is kind of crap.
Oh yeah.
It's really easy to be on the New York Times bestseller list if you know somebody at the New York Times. So that was my original idea of success, and that just is not feasible. It would be great, but I've also met New York Times bestselling authors who don't make a lot of money.
Right.
You can say bestselling author means the amount of units you move.
Right.
Does not mean the amount of money you make. If I am on Amazon, for example, I've always heard this example, and I put my book in a weird category, just a strange category, because you can do that, and I sell one book. I'm an Amazon bestseller. Well, okay, but what is that real? So now, my idea of literary success is being read, and maybe having enough money so that I can go have a blizzard.
I love that. When you started to say have enough money, I had no idea how that sentence might end, but that was a great ending to it.
I mean, as a writer, as an author, your point is to write to be read. Mm-hmm. If your point to getting into writing is, I want to be rich, there are other ways to do that that are not this.
Yeah, there's so few people who have become rich just from being authors.
I think I want to say that they usually say that in the United States, at any given time, there are 50 people who fully make their living as writers. We're talking like Stephen King, right. John Grisham, like people like that, right? Who, if a John Grisham book comes out, you buy it, and it doesn't. I've read some John Grisham books where I'm like, wow, if anybody else wrote that, that wouldn't move a book. But yeah,
that's great. Any questions from any folks in the room?
There's one online.
What do we have online?
Online, there's a question from Kyber who would like to know what's Derek's inspiration when writing.
That's my stepmother.
Oh, right. So your inspiration is clearly your stepmother.
I can say that there have been characters that were based on her in both, in at least Terrance. My inspiration when I'm writing is to get what I have to say out.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are some authors who write, I want to have fun. It's a comic romp, you know. I wish I could do that, you know. And I can write funny dialogue, but it's always wryly funny. It's never like, oh, forgetting Sarah Marshall, or you know, like it's. But I like the idea of wryly funny. I think that it's real,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I like to create real characters that you could talk to and you could meet the next day at the store and be like, oh, I met you in that book. I remember you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love that. Last answer?
I have a question. So, my brother was born with cerebral palsy,
Mhm.
and has severe impairments, like can't talk, can't
Mm.
walk, can't feed, etc. And always there's been the impression like, oh, he doesn't understand what we're saying to him,
Yeah.
etc. And you have the ability to talk, walk, etc. But like, how did you experience like the school system as you moved through and expectation levels for you?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it sounds like your father was like really with you and encouraging.
He was an advocate. That was his job. I had a mobility aid in elementary school from 1st through 6th grade, and her job was to write for me. I had a computer for stuff that wasn't math, you know, like English. And I always loved when Writer's Workshop was happening. If there was a substitute teacher, I would say, oh, the teacher says I can write. I'm allowed to just write. And, you know, I got away with it until the mobility aide would see me and she'd be like, are we in the middle of Writer's Workshop? I'd be like, no. So you shouldn't be doing this, right? No. And then as we moved into junior high and high school, when we got into high school, there were peer assistants where they got a grade for, you know, writing for me. And but there was actually a friend of mine who would do most of that. I had 3 classes with her most years, and I think the people who ran the peer assistant program enjoyed that because they didn't have to waste a peer assistant on me. They could be like, oh, Jenny's got it. So she was there for me. I think friends and you know, good friends help, but it's also, you know, the difference between help and what I call savior complex.
Mm-hmm.
And savior complex makes me want to throw up. Help is appreciated, but savior complex is not.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. It sounds like you ended up developing the right network of support around you
I
that
did.
was providing the help and not the savior.
Yeah, and they also understood what my strengths were. You know, there was a whole. I'll never forget. There was a group project. It was like a science project or something, and we had to do me and Jenny, my person who was writing for me, and 2 other people. The 2 other people were sick the entire time, right? And they had other things they had to do. But of course, then they show up on the group day, right? So I'm like, well, I did our part, and we did our part. And they're like, Derek, can you get up there and, you know, verbally tell us everything and be the verbal person for the presentation? We had nothing. We had nothing. So I'm like, okay, I mean, I'll do it. So I get up there and I am blathering and blathering, and Jenny comes over to me and goes, are you bullshitting this? And I said, yeah, I am. We got a B. So I'm a good bullshitter is what I found out.
B for bullshit.
Yep.
Well, Derek, I could sit here and talk to you all day about writing, but that's the time that we have, and I want to thank you so much for making the trek to campus.
Absolutely.
And sharing this
This
time
was
with us.
great. We had a great time.
So, just to get the last plugs in,
Yeah.
we have What Death Taught Terrance.
What Death Taught Terrance.
And the Santa Claus
The
Agreement.
Santa Claus Agreement.
Available on Amazon, other booksellers as well?
Yeah, Amazon, I think bookshop.org has them both as well. If you don't feel like supporting Bezos, which I appreciate, you know, I
Absolutely.
get that. and yeah, so, and then also, I have my podcast, it's Writing While Handicapped
Mhm.
through Authors on the Air, Global Radio Network. And yeah, come and find me there. My website is derekmcfaddeneditor.com.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's actually linked in the live stream notes as well.
All right, thank you.
Derek, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you guys for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you for everyone on the live stream. I'm going to go and quick hit the off button on that.
He's about to hit the off button, everybody.
And, all right, we ended.
So where do you live?
We're in Everett right now, but we're moving. We're,